Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight for a town hall to talk a little bit about concealed carry and maybe a few of the other issues that are facing the state of Illinois. This is probably the most timely town hall we've ever had. Just yesterday, as I'm sure many people saw, we were down in Springfield to override the governor's amendatory veto of House Bill 183, which is a concealed carry bill. So we have a lot to talk about. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about the specific details of the bill. I'll do the best I can. I've got about 6 different summaries of it up here, so if we can't find an answer for you with the resources that I've got tonight, I certainly get back to you on that. But to start off, I thought, I'd just give you a little bit of an overview of the process that led us to the place that we are today, tell you a little bit about what the bill contains, what provisions it includes, and then I'll just take questions and we can kind of have a little bit of a conversation about gun rights in Illinois and anything else really that you've got an opinion on or a question on that affects the state of Illinois. So if we start off looking at this legislative session, it was a very active legislative session for gun rights specifically. And the reason for that is because there was a lawsuit in federal court in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals that challenged Illinois' blanket across-the-board ban of the concealed carry of firearms. And what the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals said is that Illinois, it's unconstitutional for you to say, no, there's no carrying of a concealed weapon, period. It's unconstitutional. It violates the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So they struck down the aggravated unlawful use of a weapons charge in the criminal code. That was the charge that would have been brought had somebody carried a concealed weapon illegally. They struck that down. Now, recognizing that there were a lot of other things in that law that they didn't really want to strike down, they said, we'll give the legislature 180 days to go back and come up with a law that provides for the lawful carry of concealed weapons in accordance with their Second Amendment rights. So that 180-day time frame gave us until June 9th to make a decision, which worked out okay because the legislature meets and we adjourn on May 31st. So we adjourn the last day of May. That gave us plenty of time. So over the course of session, really from the first day of session, we knew that this was a major issue that had been debated for years, but we knew that this was going to be the year that action happened on it because of the court's ruling and because of the turning of public tide and really the support across the state for some level of concealed carry permission in the state of Illinois. So there were a variety of proposals that were offered. The first, and the one that you may have read about if you remember the NRA or the State Rifle Association, was House Bill 997. That was a bill that was offered by Representative Brandon Phelps and had been really pretty similar to some bills that had been introduced in previous years that never got to the point of a vote. So House Bill 997 was a good, strong bill, NRA-supported bill, State Rifle Association-supported bill that included, really everything you need, a whole standalone concealed carry bill. We took that to the House floor, and that's when the politics began. So this was very early in session, very early in our legislative session this year. We had one day where it was totally dedicated to gun legislation, to concealed carry legislation, and I think we had 30-some amendments that were offered to a single bill. And so we sat there from sun up to sundown. We were there till, I think, 10 o'clock at night, and voting and debating and hearing testimony on this wide range of amendments. Very restrictive amendments, some permissive amendments. House Bill 997 was one of those, in its entirety was one of those. And in each case, we were able to defeat some of the more restrictive things, make some political statements about the fact that certain regulations or certain restrictions were kind of out of order on this. And then when the vote came for House Bill 997, we had a majority support for the bill, but we needed 71 votes. So a simple majority is 60. We needed 71 votes for 2 reasons. First, because we projected that the governor would veto the bill, and so we needed to have a veto-proof majority. That's 71 votes. But also because the bill that we wanted to impose would have a statewide standard, and it would preempt home rule authority. So it would preempt local governments from making stricter regulations and making kind of a patchwork of different gun laws throughout the state. That also, in order for the state to preempt your ability on the local level to make those kind of laws, that also takes a supermajority, or 71 votes. So when House Bill 997, the original proposal, didn't achieve 71 votes, we knew that something had to change. Because just from a practical matter, we needed to have 71 votes in the House, and we needed a supermajority in the Senate in order to pass the concealed carry bill. So we kind of went back and forth. There were a couple other days where we brought up some different gun proposals. There was one that was called a concealed carry bill. It was very, very restrictive, would have essentially made there be about 6 places in the whole state where you could carry a concealed weapon. We defeated that strongly. There was a resounding defeat for that bill. We brought some other provisions, some proposals that members of the General Assembly had for very strong restrictions, magazine ban, high capacity magazine bans, some assault weapons bans. We were able to defeat quite a few of those proposals. But we ended up coming back to the table towards the end of legislative session saying this deadline still looms out there. Nothing's been able to get a majority or a supermajority vote so far, so we need to go back to the negotiating table and find out a bill that can get to that level. So what they did was they appointed kind of a point person for each caucus, the House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats. They brought in some legal experts, some staff members who have been working on this issue, really knew the law inside and out, put everybody together in a room, and they decided to come up with a proposal going kind of piece by piece with feedback from individual members of each caucus, with feedback for what was palatable, what people could support, what they couldn't support, maybe where some of the sticking points were, and decided to negotiate a bill that could get to that 71 vote threshold. So that process worked very well. I mean, it was the classic example of what it takes to negotiate successful legislation in the General Assembly. Frankly, we don't see that very often in Springfield. We have a lot of political impasse. We have a lot of people butting heads, and then they kind of go their separate ways and nothing happens. But the fact that this deadline was out there gave people an incentive to act, and it made that group be pretty productive, I think, in coming to a negotiated settlement. So with just a couple of days left in session, we got that negotiated settlement, came out in the form of House Bill 183. Now, this is the bill that ultimately passed. It passed with 90 votes in the House. We only needed 71. We got 90 votes in the House, so very strong, bipartisan. Members of the delegation from the city, from the suburbs, from Northern Illinois, Southern Illinois, we had broad support for this bill up and down the state. And it passed in the Senate 45-12. So again, a very significant majority, a great example of what happens when you sit down at the table and come up with a compromise and negotiate a solution and really get folks behind something. So the important things to know about House Bill 183, and again, these are a lot of the details that you may have read about over the past month or so. Some of the important things to know are really just 2 different phrases. The first is it's a shall issue law, and the second is that it includes preemption. And so let me tell you about what each of those means. A shall issue law means that we're going to establish a list of criteria in the bill. We did establish a list of criteria in the bill. If you meet those qualifications, then you shall be issued a permit. As long as you check those boxes, you shall be issued a permit. The alternative to that, or the other side, would be a may issue law, which says that if you meet those qualifications, then they may issue you a permit, or it's up to the discretion of the issuing body whether or not they give you that permit. That creates a real situation in which there's a discrepancy between you in this area, you met the qualifications and got a permit, but you in this area met the qualifications, and for whatever reason, you know, the sheriff, the local police, the state police, whatever it might be, have decided not to give out permits in that area. It would have led to a real discrepancy throughout the state. So it's important that we were able to achieve a shall issue statute, which means that the rights of people across the state of Illinois are protected equally, regardless of what municipality or county that you live in. You shall be issued a permit if you meet the qualifications that are laid out in the bill. The other important thing is this issue of preemption, and this was one of the reasons that I brought up as to why 71 votes were required. In Illinois, the ability to make laws regarding firearms fall to the state or to home rule communities. Now, home rule communities are cities that have a population of 25,000 or more and are incorporated under a home rule form of government. It gives them a lot of powers. So it's your larger cities have a lot of discretion over the types of taxes they levy, the types of laws and restrictions they put in place. They have a lot more power than a smaller city does, recognizing that there are some differences when you get into large municipalities. Around this area, DeKalb is a good example of a home rule community. So they have more than 25,000 people. They are incorporated as a home rule community. And they would have, had we not done a preemptive bill, they would have been able to make their own law about concealed carry, as would every other community in the state with 25,000 or more people and who are a home rule community. So you would have had, as you drive around the state of Illinois, you would have had been driving in and out of all these different gun law zones. I was just in the other room over here, and there's a map of the city of Sandwich border on the wall. Now, not many of us, I don't think, could draw out the city limits of the city of Sandwich on a map, because in a lot of cases, they're not just a circle. It's not just a easily drawn out issue. So especially as you leave your home community and start to travel around the rest of the state, if you were in a case where every home rule municipality could, within their borders, which you and I wouldn't really have any way of knowing what was inside the border and what was outside the border, they could have put their own rules in place, their own concealed carry laws in place. Now, the fact that this bill does contain preemption means that across the state of Illinois, no municipality can add restrictions to concealed carry of firearms. No municipality can add restrictions to firearms, or to handguns specifically. They can't say you can't buy them, sell them, they can't make you register them. There's a lot of provisions in there that say we're going to ensure that this standard is applied in a uniform way throughout the entire state of Illinois, and that individual local units of government can't make this more difficult, can't drag their feet, can't put up roadblocks, can't build walls in place to put in between you and your right to lawfully carry a concealed weapon. So both of those, I think, were very important things. They're things we fought very hard for, and things that really, when you stop and think about them, make a lot of common sense. Because the idea here is to create a law that people can understand, that they can comply with, that somebody in good faith isn't going to accidentally break the law while meaning to comply with it. And so we tried to look at a lot of those aspects there, knowing that this is something that's really going to affect the state and is going to affect you as you travel across the state of Illinois. So if we just go over a couple of the kind of broad level provisions of the bill, then we'll get into a few questions. In general, the license lasts for 5 years. You'll be able to apply for a license, lasts for 5 years, and costs $150. It's issued by the state police, and some of the qualifications include you must be 21 years of age or older, and you either must have a FOID card right now or be eligible for a FOID card right now. And so you know that there are some restrictions on FOID cards right now if you have a history of violent crimes and things like that. You've got to have a FOID card or be eligible for one in order to get a concealed carry permit. You also have to have 16 hours of training, including some live fire exercise. But if you've been trained in another state, or if you're a member of the military, if you're a veteran, you can have up to 8 hours of credit applied towards that 16-hour standard. So if you've got a concealed carry permit from another state, and I know a lot of folks did, we were down in Springfield during the negotiation for this, and people would take out and say, they got a Florida concealed carry permit, and they've got a Utah concealed carry permit, and a Wisconsin, or whatever it might be, show a variety of licenses here. You can, if you've been trained in another state, receive up to 8 hours credit there, so at least half of your training is already done. If you've done some training in another state, you just go complete the course of that, complete another 8 hours in the state of Illinois, and you'll be issued a permit there. Non-residents, there's a $300 fee for a non-resident to come through, but the law does allow somebody who has a permit in their home state to pass through Illinois without violating the law. So you can drive it, you can drive through, if you're coming from Wisconsin to Indiana, and you've got a concealed carry permit, you can pass through Illinois legally without needing to get another permit. Once you submit your application to the state police, there's 90 days, the application has to be processed within 90 days. So this will probably be a little bit more of an issue as the first rush of people kind of comes to make the application for this. But ideally, over the longer term, they're not going to be able to hold your license or your permit indefinitely, hold your application indefinitely. We've got a time frame on there. They have to take timely action on this. And again, it might be really pushing the limits of the resources at the beginning, because I anticipate a significant application pool in the beginning. But over time, I think this will be a little quicker than the 90-day limit that we have. The bill also requires that the application be available within 180 days of the passage of the law. So yesterday we overrode the governor's veto of it. It became law yesterday. So within the clock started ticking. Within 180 days of yesterday, that's the absolute limit, the absolute last day that the state police have in order to put together this application. And then you can make your application probably in an online way to apply for concealed carry. If we look at some of the regulatory aspects of the bill, first, another important provision here is that The bill does restrict carrying in, I think it's 23 different locations. Things like schools, hospitals, nursing homes, government buildings, some fairly standard exemptions for concealed carry of weapons. But importantly, it does include the provision that it designates your car, your vehicle, as a safe harbor. And the reason that's important is because, let's say you're carrying one day and you're driving around town and you've got to go drop off something at a school, right? So when you pull onto the school property, we don't want you to be in violation of the law because you had to make this unscheduled errand or because you had to go to a place where you didn't expect to go. But we also don't want to make you think at the beginning of the day, okay, am I going to go to any place that's prohibited zone here? And so I've got to leave my firearm home all day long because I'm going to go to one place at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that's a prohibited area. So your car is a safe harbor, and what that means is when you come onto the grounds of a prohibited carry place, so City Hall for example, is you couldn't carry a concealed weapon in here. But you can park in a parking lot outside City Hall, even if it's on City Hall property, and leave your firearm in your car, and that's okay. So you're not in violation of coming into a prohibited zone if you stow your firearm in a glove box, in a console, in your trunk, in a locked firearm box inside your car on those properties. So you come to a school, you can take out your firearm, put it in the console, lock your car, go inside, be okay, and not be in violation there. So it's an important provision because it means that you can carry it with some confidence throughout the course of the day, knowing that if you're making an unscheduled stop in a prohibited area, you're not going to suddenly be in violation of the law. There are some prohibitions for carrying on private property in which the owner has decided that you can't carry on their private property. So I think this is an important provision because it's also important to respect the property rights of property owners. And so if you're going to a private property location and they decide they don't want people to carry a concealed weapon on their property, they can do that. They post a sign that lets you know that you can't carry there, and you're required to leave that in your car, to leave the firearm in your car, or to make other accommodations for that in order to be in compliance there. There's some common sense things I think about. You can't carry under the influence of alcohol. It's the same standard as driving under the influence of alcohol. So if you're above a .08 or over, it's a DUI. If you're above .08 or over, it's carrying under the influence, and that's a violation of the law too. Recognizing that when people are under the influence of alcohol, they might not make wise decisions sometimes. You're also prohibited from carrying in a facility, and this is kind of the technical way of saying it, but carrying an establishment that derives 50% or more of its income from the sale of alcohol. And that essentially is a way to segment out and say, you can't carry in a bar, you can't carry in a straight bar, tavern, pub, whatever, but you can carry in a restaurant. As long as we're not expecting you to know whether they get 50 or 51% of their income from the sale of alcohol, so that's what post a sign that lets you know. But it was a way that we could say, again, we recognize that guns and alcohol don't always mix, and that we need to make some safeguard measures in place there. But knowing that there's a heck of a lot of places around that sell alcohol in some capacity, a gas station, a restaurant, a lot of places that sell alcohol, and we didn't want to say if they sell any alcohol at all, you can't carry in there because that closes down a heck of a lot of locations. So we said pretty much this is an exemption to say you can't carry in a bar, you can carry in a restaurant or in a store that sells alcohol. Again, as long as you're not yourself under the influence of alcohol. Some of the areas that the carrying of firearms would be prohibited, we mentioned a few of these before: schools, government buildings, airports. There's playgrounds, municipal parks, prisons, some things like that. Again, a lot of these are pretty common sense and are exemptions that exist in most states that do offer concealed carry laws before this. I mentioned that the license lasts for 5 years, $150 for 5 years, and then after that there's a renewal. Upon renewal, you don't have to go through the same level of training that you did in the beginning, 16 hours of training in the beginning, but in order to renew, you only need 3 hours of training. So 3 hours of training every 5 years helps, I think, kind of keep that cost down, because we know that in addition to the license application fee, there'll also be a fee for the training of some sort. The trainers now will be licensed by the Illinois State Police, so they'll establish the qualifications for that and authorize individuals to be certified trainers under the concealed carry law. There are a couple other, some other details and some kind of technicality things about what are prohibited zones and what aren't prohibited zones. If you apply for a concealed carry permit, you're going to learn that in your class. So I don't want to go through all that tonight. Unfortunately, this won't count as part of your 16 hours towards the training requirement. I'm not a licensed trainer yet, but that's just something to keep in mind, is that there are some other kind of technicalities in this that you'll learn, I think, as you go through the process. So this is an interesting time. Yesterday was the day that after we passed this bill, as I just described to you, and after it was negotiated, after it got significant majorities in both the House and the Senate towards the end of session in May, the governor really drug his feet on what he was going to do about the bill. Really took a long time. About 2 weeks ago now, issued an amendatory veto of the bill. An amendatory veto is the governor's way of saying he's not going to veto the bill outright, not going to kill the bill, but he makes a series of changes to it. So he made actually a series of 10 different changes to the bill and made it dramatically more restrictive. Eliminated a number of rights that were important to us in the bill, eliminated some preemption rights, would have led to a kind of a confusing patchwork of gun laws across the state, flipped some things completely around, flipped some sign posting requirements. One of the changes he made would have said that you could only carry in a place that put a sign in the window that said you could carry there. And if they didn't have that sign, then every place was off limits. So some things where he dramatically flipped the original intent of the bill and took it to the opposite direction. Now again, we talked about this. This was a bill that was negotiated in a bipartisan way with people from the city, from the suburbs, northern Illinois, southern Illinois. The governor wasn't active during those parts of negotiation. He didn't come to the table and say, here's the things that I'd like to see in the bill. He didn't come to the table and lay out what he thought was a fair compromise or try to influence the direction of our negotiation at all. He just waited until we had passed this bill with huge majorities and then bring it back and do an amendatory veto with the clock ticking on this deadline imposed by the federal court system, and sent it back to the legislature and said, here's the way I think things should be. So we came back into session yesterday morning, both the House and the Senate, and we, in the House at least, overrode the governor's veto with no debate immediately, with 6 more votes than we actually needed to override the veto. So it happened very quickly. I was very confident going down to Springfield yesterday that we were going to be able to override the veto because of how much work had gone into building this fair bill in the beginning. And we were able to do that. The Senate then took up the measure too and resoundingly overrode the governor's veto. And so when that happens, the governor didn't sign the bill, but both chambers voted to override. It becomes law immediately. So immediately upon that Senate vote yesterday, the second vote that happened, the bill became law. And it's for the first time we can stand in one of these meetings and say that the state of Illinois has a concealed carry law on the books, that all 50 states in the United States now have a concealed carry law on the books. We've been waiting for a long time, I think, to hear that and to say that, and we made a big step yesterday in gun owners' rights in the state of Illinois. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you've got about the process or about where we go from here. There are still some things we're trying to figure out. This is about a 24-hour old law, so we're still working through a few provisions of this. And I know there's some changes today, but I'm happy to help out and answer anything I can.
I would like to thank you for co-sponsoring 183 and the prior bill, which was sponsored by Representative Phillips. Also for your vote on 183 and your override vote for 183. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly happy to do that. I've talked throughout my campaign, before I was sworn in, throughout this whole legislative session about Second Amendment rights being important. And I think when you looked at the list of co-sponsors that we had on both House Bill 997 and House Bill 183, it was a reflection of the fact that across the state of Illinois, this was an issue that didn't have a party label to it. This wasn't an issue that had a geographic label to it. We had a very broad base of support for this. And this is the way that legislation is supposed to work. You're supposed to sit down with people who have maybe different concerns, different views, different inputs on things, and come to a consensus agreement and a bill that can get the required number of votes. And when you look at that list of co-sponsors, I think you see that across the state of Illinois, we really had a lot of folks come together in order to pass this bill. So it was a very good thing to see.
Yeah, is there any reciprocating agreement with other states, and why is it only 5 years instead of, 10 for the other states. And at the end of the 5 years, do you have to pay another 150, or is it a reduced, application fee?
I'll answer a couple of these. The renewal fee is still $150, but you only have 3 hours of training instead of the 16. The reciprocity, I'll have to look for the specific on that, but I believe there is not reciprocity in the beginning of the law, but I think it takes effect after a couple of years. There's no reciprocity?
There's no reciprocity mentioned in the bill, but there was no reciprocity mentioned in Wisconsin's Terry bill.
Okay.
Initially. However, after about a year, then Wisconsin started recognizing permits from other states. But
Okay.
reciprocity was not initially written in the Wisconsin bill either.
Hey, that's a great point. Thanks for that. So we had some variety of discussions about this, and I know there were some thoughts about that. And I remember the Wisconsin example where there wasn't reciprocity in the very beginning of the law, and there ended up being. So I'll certainly advocate that. I think that's a fair solution to have, and we'll push for that. Yeah, as again, I think we're going to see a big, massive pile of applications that come through right at the beginning, and it might take a little time to get those things processed and those permits issued, and then we might have a chance to come back and say, okay, now that we've kind of got the initial rush over, let's talk about some of these other issues like reciprocity.
Yes, sir. My name is David Frazier. I'm an alderman here in the city of Stanley, so it's indeed a pleasure to finally get to meet you. My question is the what type of weapons are they going to restrict the individuals to be allowed to carry? I mean, is it going to be just simply the Glock, or are they going to be allowed to carry the 38s, the 357s? What do we have for a format with that?
Yeah, my understanding is that it's any handgun. So it has to be a handgun. Local governments, there can be no further restriction on handguns, and it's specifically an allowance of that a handgun be carried in a concealed manner. So any handgun, my understanding. Any handgun.
Anything considered a handgun, as long as it's concealed.
So, I have a question for you. As far as Chicago's handgun ban, how does that, is that off the table now, pretty much? I mean, you're allowed to own a firearm in the city. We don't live in the city of
Right.
Chicago, so it's not
Right.
as big of a deal for us, but, carrying in the city of Chicago, I mean, is there a handgun?
No, that handgun ban does not apply. It's not in effect.
Totally.
No, so you have the ability to carry a concealed, if you have a permit and you meet these qualifications and don't carry in these zones, you can carry a handgun in a concealed way anywhere throughout the state of Illinois, and no local government can restrict your ability to do that. That was the really important part about the statewide standard, a uniform standard saying that.
Yeah, just was curious because they already have the ban in effect. I didn't know if
I think that ban was struck down by, in court.
How crazy are these qualifications you gotta have?
They're not crazy. So here's some of the reasons that they could deny a permit. Law enforcement can object to your application if they believe you constitute a clear and present danger to yourself or others, or a threat to public safety. Now, if that happens, if they make an application, or if they make an objection to your application, you go in front of a board, and the board hears the case, hears the objection from the law enforcement official, and hears your defense of that, and makes a determination on whether you can carry or not. So they can object, and they could be overruled. They've got to have a compelling reason. And I think the standard, they say, based on a preponderance of the evidence. So they have to present evidence, and the board has to rule that they have a compelling and legitimate reason for denying you a permit. So that's the first thing. The second is you couldn't be found guilty of a misdemeanor involving the use of threat or physical force or violence within the last 5 years. So if you had a violent crime conviction in the last 5 years, or 2 or more DUI convictions within the last 5 years. Both of those would make you ineligible for a permit. You could not be you cannot have been ordered in a residential or a court-ordered treatment for alcoholism or drug treatment in the last 5 years. And also that if you have an existing mental health condition that right now would make you ineligible to receive a FOID card, then that would mean you're ineligible to have a concealed carry permit as well. So those, and there's also, the law enforcement can also object to your application if you've had 5 or more arrests in the last 7 years. 5 or more arrests in the last 7 years. And the reason for that is because there were, they brought up some examples of cases in which people had been arrested time and time again for a lot of things related to gang crimes, arrests made time and time again, but not maybe convictions in all those cases. You know, maybe there were arrests made and then the charges were dropped because they were working on something else because of limited resources, things like that. So if you've been arrested 5 times in the last 7 years, even if there weren't convictions, then it's not an automatic denial, but it's a reason to go to the board and say, you know, here's why we think they should be denied, and you have a chance to defend yourself too and say, here's why I don't think I should be denied.
I heard you say that the state police have 180 days to come up with a way to accept applications. Now, does that mean the training and their certified trainers and all that stuff will all be in place before the 180 days, and we'll have the option to take the training? That way when application day comes, we can just apply? Or, I mean, how are they, you know, I mean, does their whole system essentially have to be up and running in 180 days?
So I believe the law says that they just must be have applications available in 180 days. This is an example of one of those things that we got to figure out now.
I mean, if they take a year to certify
Right,
people, or
right.
you know, they got one person certified.
So I think one of the important things to know is that since this bill was really pushed by the Federal Court of Appeals, the 7th Circuit of the Federal Court, their reason for mandating this is because under our existing law, we are in violation of the Second Amendment. So that's a pretty strong impetus to act. That's a real reason that we needed to come up with this bill. So just having this bill on the books, just having the words written in our statute book, doesn't mean that we're magically in compliance with the Second Amendment. In order to really comply in the way that the federal court's going to deem real compliance, this has to be a legitimate law that's in place, that's operational, that doesn't, you know, place these unreasonable restrictions or huge burdens in between you and the law that you're seeking to comply with. So I think that if there were, you know, these significant delays, if they were throwing up real roadblocks in the process of implementing the laws we passed, we'd have a legitimate recourse to go back to the federal court and say, you know, you're being unreasonable in your delays here, and you're still prohibiting us from exercising the Second Amendment. That's the same problem that you struck us down before, you know, for violating. So, you know, come back in this. So I think it's important to know that it's really, this law has to be in place and active for us to comply with the Second Amendment, and that not just the words written on a paper.
To answer your question, I think the Illinois State Police has 2 months to determine who's qualified as trainers, and they have a total of 6 months before they can start accepting applications. And then 90 days after that, so April 5th, you'll start seeing the first applications will be in mailboxes.
At the latest.
At the latest.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. And there's actually
That's what I was wondering, if the
yeah.
state police had any
They have 2 months to determine who the trainers are going to be.
so we could start the.
right. So it's so 2 months within that 180 days.
I was just
So
wondering if
yeah.
It was going to take them 6 months to come up with
Right,
a piece of paper
right.
and go, oh, you can fill this in.
Right, and so, you know, that's if they delay as much as they can. That's the April 5th. But the other thing is, I know there's a court challenge to the 180-day provision that we have in this law too. There was filed by the same woman who filed the initial case that led to the decision that brought us to this point. Filed an appeal with the court to say that it was unreasonable delay to say that we have to wait 180 days for this to happen. So that was just filed today in the federal court. We'll see what the court makes a ruling on that, but it's
Mary Shepard.
that's right, Mary Shepard, yeah. So she filed that appeal today, or I'm not sure what the legal actual filing was, but I know she made a statement to the court today that 180 days was even too long of a delay to have. So she was asking for it to be sped up.
Yes, I have a Utah concealed carry permit. It was $125 for the class and $51 for the permit. Total of $176. That's a 3-hour class for $125. A 16-hour class, if you figure that it's about the same per hour, you're looking at about $600, $700 for the class, plus the $150. Now the renewal there is $10. You're gonna be looking at almost $1,000 to
Well,
get a permit.
yeah.
That's really an
I
infringement on our Second Amendment right.
First, I'll say that I wish there were some other things about our law that were more like the Utah law, but we are a state that's different than Utah, and we had to make negotiations to happen to get to the vote level that we needed to get to. The original fee started much lower than what we ended up with. So we started when we first put 997, House Bill 997 in place. I can't remember exactly what the fee was, but it was significantly lower than $150. What's that?
It was $100.
$100.
The instructors that were to teach the class in order to get the permit could charge no more than $100
Yeah.
for the class.
Yeah. So the other thing I'd say, and so we tried to get, we tried to push for these to be low, because you're right, that is kind of a hurdle that puts you between you and your ability to exercise your Second Amendment rights. But I'd also say that, we've got this ability now for folks to go out there and become trainers and kind of generate a second source of income for themselves. And so it's, let's hope that there are some entrepreneurs out there who can go out and say, look, there's going to be a heck of a lot of people who need training and they want to get it really quick. You have some opportunity for folks to become a certified trainer, and you might see some price competition happen there, and it drive the price below that $600 or whatever you're talking about. I'm optimistic that would happen because of how much potential there is to go out there and start a small business training for concealed carry.
You can take a hunter's ed class that'll count towards 8 hours of that for completely free through the state of Illinois. So then you're looking at an 8-hour class, and most of the trainers I talk to are looking at $100, $150.
What if you already have the hunter's ed class?
Then you're looking at 8 hours of training.
Then you got credit towards that 8 hours
You're
of
going to
training.
spend a Saturday and you'll have your permit. Easy peasy.
Now, my
You'll-
Utah
Yeah.
class, does that count toward the Illinois class?
Yes.
But only
8 hours. Just 8 hours.
Oh, it is 8 hours?
Yep.
Okay.
So hunter's ed class,
Hunter's ed.
any other concealed carry permit.
That's right.
Along with the DD 214.
Yeah.
So does that mean you don't have to take a class if you have both of those?
No, you can only get a maximum of 8 hours credit. Yeah, people can have 24 hours here on this thing. We can add up to more than the recommended. Just 8 hours of it.
We have law enforcement credentials or private law enforcement credentials with a carry card. You can skip the class entirely.
Because you've taken training in excess of that. 16
Anyone with a
hours.
carry card has got 20 hours of successful training.
How would you go about becoming a trainer?
I'm not sure about what that procedure is going to be. I think the state police will establish what's going to take to become a trainer.
Well, all of the laws that you fashion in Springfield are aimed at law-abiding people. And everything you've said tonight is designed to curb the behavior of people who act responsibly. As you know, I teach at the Sheridan Correctional Center, and many of the students I have are in for illegal use of a firearm. And so I told the students this morning in my class that I was coming tonight because I try to teach them a little bit about government, and this is an American tradition where we can actually impact our government and talk to our state representative at a town meeting. It's a very American idea, and you should try and do these kind of things when you get out of jail. And then I said the topic is gun control. And I said, for many of you are in for, a crime involving a weapon. And I said, where did you get your gun? Did you buy it? Did you license it? Did you get a Void card? Did you get bullets from the gun store? Do you have a license to carry a gun? And the whole class just started to laugh. I said, well, where do you get it? And the answer that came back was we steal, Chuck will tell you, we steal them from gun stores, gun fairs, other people who own guns that, and alter the registration so you can't tell who owned the gun before you used it. The laws just so that you know, I mean, the governor talks about, we've got to stop the murders in Chicago. None of this stuff is going to have an impact on the murders in Chicago. You can forget that right now. If you think that what you've done is stopping crime, it is not going to do that.
Well, I think I'd make a point of, first, I think this would allow law-abiding citizens to be able to defend themselves should they be in a situation like that. So, you know, it may have an impact on violent crimes in that way, because law-abiding citizens have the ability to defend themselves that they don't currently have because they follow the laws, and there wasn't an ability to do that. But I think you're right to say that, you know, that there were a lot of misconceptions about the tie between gun laws that we make in Springfield and gun crimes that happen specifically in the city of Chicago. There was a press conference in Springfield yesterday talking about gun violence in Chicago. If you've seen Chicago press over the past couple of days, you know that the last weekend was one of the most violent weekends they've seen in a very long time. It's not because law-abiding citizens who have FOID cards and legally obtained weapons are going out and making these decisions. And I think that, you know, we really stress that point during debates, is that this concealed carry bill is not going to lead to an increase in crime. We're not talking about the people who are committing these crimes right now. We're talking about law-abiding citizens who are going to follow these laws, and we need to protect their ability to have exercise their Second Amendment rights. And I think that that argument was successful in that there were members of the General Assembly who at the beginning of session probably said, you know, no way am I ever going to vote for a bill that allows somebody to carry a weapon. And as the course of session went on, we started talking a lot more about these situations and stressing the fact that this applies to law-abiding citizens, and law-abiding citizens are not the ones committing those crimes right now. And at the end of the day, I think several of those people who maybe were initially hesitant to vote for it, voted for it, because they're looking back at their districts thinking, do I want only criminals in my district to be armed, or do I want law-abiding citizens to have the chance to protect themselves against those criminals? And they chose to be on the side of law-abiding citizens.
I'd like to address something that you said, that you didn't think it would deter crime or lessen crime. It's not going to stop the gangbangers. Like you said, they laughed at you when you asked about where they bought the guns. I think, my personal opinion, and there are some statistics to back it up, other violent crimes of opportunity, purse snatchings, muggings, rapes, that will go down. Generally does. There was a woman, it was on the news the other day, some woman got raped at a bus stop on the near north side. And I think some of those kinds of crimes will lessen. It typically has in states where concealed carry has passed. Because some guy that, oh, I'm gonna grab this woman and pull her in the alley, he doesn't know if she has a gun in her purse or any, purse snatching on a Mad Mile, or knock down some old lady and punch her in the face and snatch her purse. I think it's going to cut down on that side. It's not going to deter gang crime. That's my opinion of this.
All right, other questions?
Yeah, right now I work with a guy that is a felon.
Mm-hmm.
He rides with me to work every day. How would I still be able to carry with him in the car with me? How would that work?
Yeah, you can carry. Who you're around won't affect your ability to carry. No.
I have a quick question for you. It doesn't regard CCW, but it does regard the FOID cards. Right now, people that I know that have been applying for FOID cards are waiting 5 months to get their FOID card. By state law, the state police have 30 days to deny you a card, and then they must issue it. Is there anything that you can do in the legislature, or maybe that the legislature is planning to do, to get the state police to actually abide the law?
One of the things is I know that part of the registration fee for the concealed carry permit goes to the state police to help them meet the processing requirements and the logistics that are involved with issuing FOID cards and these permits. So hopefully being able to increase the staffing at the state police will help them process applications in a more timely fashion. Another provision, I think this is a good one that came out of the bill too, looks at the fact that we are going to have FOID cards and we're going to have concealed carry permits, and we also have state issued IDs. There's the establishment of a group of legislators to look at consolidating those into a single identification card, maybe making a designation on your driver's license, whether you're a FOID card designee, whether you're a concealed carry designee, some things like that. So I think instead of having to carry 3 different cards here, you'd be able to carry 1 card and they'd be able to streamline the process a little bit. So I think it's a good thing to put those together and to maybe help reduce some of this redundancy where they're issuing all these different cards and you're having to keep track of expiration dates on things. To be able to bring those together, I think is a good idea.
In regards to that, if you get pulled over by the police at any point in time, they take your driver's license if you don't have the insurance card.
Yeah, sure.
So at that point in time, are you pretty much rendered without your concealed carry, without your FOID card, and without your driver's license?
That's exactly the kind of issue that this group is going to look at. So they have to allow you to the ability to still do that if your license went away. But I think this idea of streamlining the process makes sense because we have heard a lot of complaints about how long it takes to process these things and how many hoops people got to jump through in order to comply with it.
I'm glad you said that. That was a really good point about losing as of your bond for like a ticket or something silly. But another point is I don't necessarily want the cashier at Walmart to know I'm a concealed weapons holder.
Sure.
Or whatever other random reason I might have for a driver's license. So please bring that to the group.
That's a good point too.
I might want be willing to deal with 3 cards as opposed to having my privacy violated, and that
Sure.
I understand the reason for consolidating. I truly do, but there might be some privacy issues with
That's a
that.
great point. It's a great point.
I was kind of curious with the same thing, that with the state police, it took me 5 months to get mine. I just got it not too long ago. Well, how would you say they're not going to do the same thing with this permit?
Yeah, there are provisions we put in place to try to force their hand on the timely processing of these, and we provided funding through the fee in order to help them meet those deadlines. So there's never any guarantees in Springfield, but we certainly tried to look out and see that was a potential for happening and try to put some preventions in place.
Going off of everyone's concern on time, as well as consolidating IDs, if the idea that was put out there that an endorsement was going to be put on a driver's license, how many different facilities are you going to have to go through in order to properly carry? I'd like to know what the legislators plan on addressing. If you get a FOID card by the ISP, you get a carry card by the ISP. The minute you get your carry card, you now have to go into the DMV, which is overpopulated as is,
Right.
and wait for a new card.
Yeah, we got to try to keep people out of the DMV. I'm with you on that. Yeah, that's a good concern too. Yeah.
Driver's license, if you lose yours, it's $10.
Right.
A brand new carry card is $75.
Right. That's right. That's what this current bill provides for the specific card,
So you
specific concealed carry card.
your wallet taken from you, it's going to cost you $75.
Well, so yeah, that's right. For the concealed carry permit that's in there right now, you're right. It's a $75 replacement fee.
You change your address, $75.
You're right.
Wow, that's a bit upsetting.
I agree.
I just have a question kind of out of curiosity. Now, granted, we're all law-abiding citizens here. Nobody's going to intentionally break any laws. But how steep are some of the repercussions for, I've left my wallet in the car, but my Glock's still up my waist? You know what I mean? Or it's just simple stuff.
Sure. We look at, let's see.
I mean, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, we looked at that too and talked about how we don't want to uneasily make people. Yeah, I believe it's a let's see, carrying under the influence be a Class A misdemeanor, penalties for violations Failing to inform the officer, second, okay.
There's a bunch of stuff in there about if you're carrying in a prohibited place.
Right.
First time's a misdemeanor.
Class A misdemeanor,
Yeah.
second offense, class 4, let's see, yeah, class 4 felony. It provides for a suspension up to 6 months on the second violation. On the third violation, it can be a permanent revocation,
First thing you have
but
to
nothing
do
with the
is
first.
probably take your FOID card when you're done anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, like I
yeah.
said, nobody's gonna plan on this, you know.
Sure, no, right. And we talked about that. So we didn't want to make it a felony if you walk through the wrong area. And also I think it's important to know that the law does say that you can't knowingly carry into those facilities. So if you inadvertently pass through someplace, it's not going to be a violation because you didn't know that the zone you were passing through was a school or something like that.
The human factor.
That's right.
Humans make mistakes.
That's right.
Doesn't make you a bad person trying to break the law.
That's right. So the first violation is, just a Class A misdemeanor. But again, they'd have to show that you knowingly carried your weapon into a prohibited zone.
You were trying to break the law.
Right.
Question. I understand the concept of consolidating all the licenses, it makes sense. But currently, the FOID card is good for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking, this other license is worth for 5 years, are they going to be reducing the time of the FOID card then? Or how is that going to work?
The
out?
FOID card's 5 years. Or I'm sorry, the FOID card is 10 years, yeah, and this permit is 5 years. Yeah, that's another thing this committee's gonna have to get together, because your driver's license too would have a different expiration date on that too. So yeah, I mean, all of those issues, I think that's why it's not in this bill, is because there's too many questions that remain out there. But I think the idea behind that is to say, let's try to break this log jam that's happening right now with FOID card applications. And
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We're talking different time frames.
you're right.
So you currently don't have a FOID card in order to get your CCW, or I'm sorry, you said that, where's I going with this? Without your FOID card, you had to be eligible for a FOID.
That's right.
So if you've got 90 days and you had this 5-month wait, just go for your concealed, and does that mean you automatically have your FOID at the same time?
It does. Yeah.
'Cause, I
if
mean,
if
they're
you
not
make an
gonna give a
application-
concealed
if you're
one if you
eligible
don't
for
own a gun.
You have to be eligible for a FOID card, and you can make a direct application for your concealed carry permit, and it constitutes your FOID card too.
You can call I called my senator and
Yeah.
had him bump up me up to the top of the line.
Yeah, if you're having problems with your FOID card application, please give my office a call, and we'll do whatever we can to help speed you along the process.
I was like 13.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
not
if you
a
talk
big
to anybody, if you're running into somebody who wants to, or is waiting on an application,
Everybody's-
give us a call. We've looked at a lot of those cases, I know, through the office already,
A
so.
lot of friends that are like, oh, I haven't done my FOID card yet. So
Yeah,
now it's like,
tell them
don't
to
worry about it.
jump into the CCW, yeah.
Go for it.
Do you have an email where I can send
Yes,
anyone that comes through my store and I've got all their
you bet.
tracking numbers?
Yeah, Austin is my district aide back here. He works on all that, and we'll help you out any way we can.
I guess my question would be about the home rule. My question is basically for you guys that made the law, and what kind of trouble is that going to make for a person that's qualified to carry, and then they automatically go into an area the home rule's made a different rule.
We preempted their ability. Home rule communities cannot make restrictions on concealed carry of a weapon. That's right, they cannot.
I didn't understand that. I know.
Yep, sorry about that. So yeah, that was one of the provisions we really fought hard for, to say that this state law can't be trumped, can't be made more specific by any home rule municipality. Yep.
Unless it's private property.
The private property owner themselves can determine on their own property.
Never would, but I was like, you can't carry.
That's right. Yep. You as a property owner have that right.
So, but that also is going to give the opportunity for every establishment out there to make their own decision, essentially.
The property owner of those establishments. That's right.
Every restaurant,
That's right.
every-
It will give them that ability to make that decision, and I think that's a important recognition of their right as a property owner.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just like I would like that, right? If it was any other law.
Yep.
I would like any other law being forced upon me
Sure.
in my own house.
Sure.
So everybody.
And they'll have to post a sign that says this is a prohibited carry, yeah. And they've got some, there's got to be a certain size and posted at an entrance in a clear and conspicuous place.
So
You'll know.
That's kind of like the smoking law.
Yeah, we see smoking signs all over the place, yeah, yeah.
Yes, wilding has been going on in Chicago specifically, where groups of gang members get together and start attacking people in public places. And one of these just happened over the 4th of July at the fireworks at Grant Park. And this woman was attacked, her phone was taken, she was knocked down and kicked. Guy took off with her phone. She's at a park, which is an area that you can't carry in. And this is a gun-free zone, and this woman has, even now, or a year from now, when this is in effect, if she has a concealed carry card, she can't carry and protect herself in that situation. These gang members know it.
Right.
This is a problem.
Yeah, you're right, and that's why we talked about trying to limit the restricted zones to the extent that we could, and you're right about that. And so there are going to be areas where you're not allowed to carry a concealed weapon and protect yourself, and that's one of the realities of the bill.
So right now you can't do it anywhere.
Right.
He said at a park. So that means when you're, so let me just provide I know this is kind of specifics, an example. So when you're walking down the city of Chicago with your girlfriend, whatever, and you stop at Millennium Park, you're in violation.
That's right.
Yeah, see, so that's the stuff you're gonna have to watch out for.
And it's municipal park. I think that's the specific provision, and there are some pass-through provisions for example, if you're on a running or a biking trail that passes through one of these parks, you can carry as you pass through that park on one of those trails. Those aren't prohibited areas. There are some technicalities around the park qualification, but I mean, you're right. In general, if you're in a municipal park, you can't carry there.
Yeah, in the news, they were talking about municipalities had so many days to ban assault weapons in this bill. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, they have 10 days from yesterday to make any law that they are able to pass that would affect assault weapons. And they can't, after this 10-day window is up, they can't make any new laws after that 10-day window. So the clock is ticking on that.
Okay. Any size municipality or?
That's a good question. Just home rule alone.
So
Sandwich could not do it. DeKalb could, but Sandwich could.
Oswego recently did it, and
Okay.
their chief of police said it's unenforceable law, so they encourage you not to do it.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. Any other questions? Yeah.
But the concealed carry would trump the home rule, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
But handguns were considered an assault weapons.
Yeah.
Was there a clip size that went into effect, or like 10 or less, or for the hand?
For the hand, no.
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 You put 30 rounds in your Glock, and as long as you can keep it in your pocket or your hip, you're good.
Yeah. Get a big coat.
There was no ban on the amount of it. I know he said, magazine size, but multiple magazines, nothing in there as far as anything like that.
That was all the governor's doing, and they overrode that.
One other quick question I have for you is, in Texas, they have a law that says that if an establishment decides that they're not going to allow people to carry, that they're responsible for the safety of their patrons. Do you foresee Illinois going in that direction, or would you support a law along that? So if someone's going to take away my right to carry in an establishment, that I can still be safe?
I'm not sure what the law in Texas. I'll look into it. But I mean, what does it mean to be responsible for the safety of the people?
It basically means, should you go to a supermarket,
right,
and the supermarket says you can't carry in their supermarket, that should something happen to you while you're in their establishment, they're fully responsible for it. That they really don't have any legal recourse to, when you go to sue them for whatever, that they don't have any legal recourse to be able to say, no, well, that's really not our fault, it was an act of God, or whatever.
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at that. That's the first I've heard about that, so I'll take a look at it.
I had a question about when we were passing the original bill in the House, the speaker made this speech about coming to realize that maybe he was on the wrong side of things for years and years and years. And the words he used, like, not even gonna try to quote it, but like my jaw hit the ground. I'd never heard a Madigan ever utter the words like, hey, gun rights are maybe okay, was the gist of it. Do you see him being our friend next year? I'll settle for not even an enemy.
Well, in this case, I think he saw the fact that there's a large majority behind this bill, and came around on that. I hope, though, I think the speaker's one example, and there were some other members who made some surprising statements during the debate and the final passage of this, recognizing the fact that some of the misconceptions that they had talked about with the effect of guns in previous debates and in previous years didn't hold true, and they came around to notice that. Look, we wouldn't have got to 90 votes in the House if people wouldn't have changed their minds on gun rights. And so, one of the successes, I think, out of this session was the fact that, spurred by this deadline that the court put in place, a lot of people took a very hard look at their positions on gun rights, and a lot of people changed their minds and ended up voting for this bill. Folks who, again, at the beginning of session, I would never have thought in a million years would have voted for a bill like this. So we saw some, some good advocacy campaign, some good educational efforts by a lot of pro-gun folks around the state, and it did change minds, and it did affect legislators' votes at the end of the day. Any other questions? Well, thanks very much for coming tonight. I'll be happy to talk with anybody afterwards too, and share some contact information too. You can always contact the office, and with any questions or requests or anything, we'll be happy to help in any way we can. So thanks a lot for being here tonight and for all your questions and participation. Thank you.